This video is going to explain how shared costs rule work in Plannuh. So we are starting with a very simple budget to make this clear. We have 4 budget segments: corporate, PR, events, and demand gen. And with shared cost rules in Plannuh, you can share money between segments. What that really means is that multiple segments can contribute to a single expense or to a campaign or to an expense bucket, and those are defined by rules. So here we go. We've got our 4 budget segments. Let's move over into the Plan tab here. And what we can see in here is that we have a campaign, and that campaign has an expense bucket, and the expense bucket is for a customer dinner. Okay? And furthermore, we can see that this campaign was created in the demand gen budget segment. So right now, demand gen is footing the bill for all of this. So how do we share this? First of all, we come into the manage accounts. This is where lots of the admin functions live, and you have to be an admin to create a shared cost rule. We come here and we're going to create a new rule for this budget. So you can see here these rules are in the same account. This is an account that has multiple budgets, but these ones that say RoboDog here, that's the name of a budget. We're going to create a new one for our budget, and our budget is called test budget shared costs. So this rule will only apply to that budget. And we're going to call it my campaign share. And what we want to do is share the costs of this campaign between all 4 segments. So the first thing we're going to do is say, well, demand gen is going to take some of it, and they're going to pay half of all the costs. Events has agreed to pay 10% of the costs. So let's do that and see what happens. Well, so what Plannuh does, it says, well, that's only 60%. It won't let you activate a rule until this number is exactly 100%. So we're sharing across all 4 of our budgets. So now we'll add another segment, the PR segment. And the PR segment has agreed to pay 20%. Now what do we look like? Yep, we're still 20% short. So we're going to add the 4th and final segment. And you'll see here, by the way, these ones that already have a share have been grayed out, so I can't accidentally select them twice. So now I select corporate, and Plannuh filled in the gap. So here we go. I've got a 4-way split of costs for this particular campaign. Now, so far, the rule hasn't been applied to anything, and it hasn't been activated. And as an administrator in Plannuh, you have to activate this. And once you do, which I'm about to do here, this rule is now active. So any user, not just administrators, but any read-write user or administrator can apply this rule. And they can apply it to an individual expense, an expense bucket, or to a campaign. And it will split the costs of the individual expense or all the expenses inside a campaign or expense bucket according to this split that's been defined in the rule. It won't just split the cost of the expenses, but if you've reserved budget for something, for a campaign or an expense bucket, it will actually share out the budget that's been reserved as well. So let's head over to the Plan tab and see what that looks like. So here we are now. We're in the Plan tab. We have one campaign. And you will see this little pie thing down here, and it says share cost. And it's basically an invitation to share costs for this campaign if you'd like to. If you don't, just leave it. It's going to stay 100% in the demand gen budget segment. but we do want to share it. So when I click on this, I have a few options. I could move 100% of the costs to another budget segment if I choose to, or I can apply a rule. And here's our rule that we just defined. And Plannuh helpfully tells you here what this would mean. It says, hey, if you apply this rule, this is how costs and budget allocations will be spread. So you can see what's happening. Now you might be thinking, well, if I'm the admin and I define the rule, maybe I don't need to see that. That's true, but Plannuh's for marketing teams, and you've got lots of read-write users and maybe other admin users who don't know what the rule is that you've defined. So it's helpful to say, hey, if you apply this, this is what's going to happen. So we're going to pick that one. And you may be thinking, well, that wasn't very exciting, nothing's really changed, but it has. First of all, this is no longer white and see-through, and it doesn't say share costs, it now says shared. So it's telling you, because it's gone blue here, you've applied a rule. Second thing that's worth knowing is you can see that this campaign has an expense bucket. If I open this up, it's also applied the same rule to the expense bucket. So what that means is these shared cost rules are inherited by anything that's inside the campaign. Any expense bucket or any expenses that live inside the campaign also have that shared cost rule. How can we test whether this has really worked? Well, the way we do that is by applying filters. So we've shared this between all the budgets. So now what we're going to do is say, well, let's just pick 3 of the 4 and apply a filter. What happens? Here we go. We can see that there's the demand gen campaign, and it was a $40,000 budget, and demand gen took 50% of the share. So 50% of 40,000 is 20,000. Events only agreed to pay 10%, so there's their 4,000. PR agreed to pay 20%, and there's their 8,000. And if we pop this open, we would see that the expense buckets and the expenses are also equally shared. You can see here that 7K of expenses have committed and 3.5K here and 17.5K here. So everything, not just the budget that's been allocated, but the value of the expenses has been shared as well. Now, you may have seen this message that says, hey, if you're looking at these kind of sub parts of campaigns, the thing that just displays the share, you can't edit those. You can't do that because the share that's been assigned to a segment is defined algorithmically. You can't go in and edit a sub element individually. So if you wanted to change, let's say, the amount that you reserved for this campaign, what you do is just clear the filters, and then the person who owns the campaign would come in and edit it. Now, another very common thing that happens is that when you have a campaign with any complexity, there may be elements in there that people don't agree to share. So in this instance, I've created an example where the campaign has a customer dinner. And let's imagine that the people who are agreeing to invest overall in the campaign are saying, you know what, I'm not going to pay for a customer dinner. That's just something that the demand gen guys want to do. So the events and PR and corporate teams say, we're okay with investing our share in the overall campaign, but we're not going to contribute anything to this customer dinner. That's okay. What we would do is we come in here, right, find this expense bucket, and we can say, okay, this belongs 100% to demand gen. And now an interesting thing happens. You see this little orange slice of the pie appears. What that orange is telling us is that not everything in this campaign has the same shared rules policies. And so now if I open this out, you can see that this is not shared in the same way that this one up here is. Another way to check that is let's reapply our filters. And what you'll see is there's now available budget in here because these guys are not contributing to the expenses that live now 100% with demand gen inside this campaign. The other way that we can verify that, if we come over to the expenses tab, you'll notice that all of these expenses have a little icon under budget segment that's actually saying, hey, these are shared, except the big dinner, which everyone said, hey, we're not going to pay for that. That belongs entirely to demand gen. Now, if I clear the filters, you'll see the same thing. The media buy is shared, the consultant is shared, but the big dinner that the other segment said, we're not going to pay for that. That belongs 100% to demand gen. That just belongs to demand gen. So very powerful, lots of flexibility to split and share costs in campaigns, expense buckets, or even individual expenses exactly how you want to and exactly according to the proportions that you want to.